Hey, hello.
Open there.
Hey there. Let me
Hi. Is it
Hey,
Vinay? Am I pronouncing it properly?
Vinay.
Oh, Vinay. Okay.
Nice to
Vinay.
nice,
Thank
nice to see you.
thank you. Thank you for saying clicks in that. My picture's kind of big. And
It's so
forget
it's always the thing with video, right? It's always different in different platforms and cameras and
right, right, right.
well,
So how
nice.
are you? It's so great to be connected. And my marketing partner wanted to me to tell you he was so pleased with your graciousness and professionalism.
Oh
And
wow.
yes, so thank you.
Well, thanks. I just sent you a note on LinkedIn. I said after this, I'm always looking to polish the wheel. So I would love to, after this, if I would love to get some candid feedback while it's still fresh in your mind, because we're always
Sure.
trying to make this better. But then also, at the end of this, if there's some opportunities for us to collaborate, would love to chat further. So
Love that. So I just want to clarify, because when we first scheduled this, it was going to be on the decision risk, and I was going to respond to questions about the reactivity within operations and organizations and how that negatively impacts the decision making processes.
Yep.
But then the title changed a little bit about overwhelm. When you use the word overwhelm, I was like, oh, I could do a 3-day symposium on overwhelm, because I was always in so much overwhelm. And that's when I developed my 9 habits that are in my ebook. So I just want to get a little clarification about what you want me to address.
Okay, yeah. So sorry if there was a confusion there. So I think part of this is we're kind of getting our processes and kind of getting our training wheels off in terms of rebooting this new process and getting into a cycle. Just take us. Maybe there's some cross lines here. So the title of this is when work moves faster but less gets done, and what it starts costing. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
And what we want to specifically highlight is this idea of quantifying. So we've got a tool set that quantifies the strategy to execution alignment gap, and it comes from decision risk.
Yes.
So as I walk through this process, I'm going to kind of introduce a concept and show, hey, look, this is kind of the impact of it. And then I'm going to kind of just turn around to you and say, Catherine, can you share some experiences? You've been in the boardrooms, you've been in the conference rooms. That's what I'd like to do.
Okay, yeah, I'm real good on my feet. So
Good. We should have people arriving here shortly.
Good. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, give me a quick moment here. I'm going to just grab myself a
what you need to do.
What's that?
I'll just do what you need to do. I'll be here.
I'll be back in just about 30 seconds. All right, we've got a couple of people joining in. Let's give it a couple more minutes and we'll get ourselves started. Hey, Alex, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. I'm doing super. Thanks for joining. While we're waiting for more people to arrive, let me introduce you to Catherine. Catherine, Alex, Catherine.
Alex, great to meet you.
You as well.
Thank you for joining us today for this important conversation.
Absolutely. Always a fan of anything Vinay has to say.
Yes, me too.
Well, thanks, Alex. The $20 is in the mail. Thank you.
Perfect.
It's not
How many
true.
times can I say it?
We'll give it a couple moments because I know everyone's probably just switching between meetings and doing meeting transition. Alex, you still in Northern Virginia? Or
Silver Spring now.
Okay.
But
Gotcha.
still in the same area.
Gotcha.
Overall. Yeah. Moved back from Texas 6 years ago.
Yeah. You did that right. Yeah, you did that right around the COVID time, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah. It moved from arguably the most cavalier part of the country to arguably the least.
Well, Good. Well, hopefully this will be a good session. We got a number of other people who are joining in here. Welcome, everyone. Please feel free to introduce yourself by raising a hand, say hello, or you can type directly in the chat. Let me go to the chat so everyone knows where it is. There you go. You should be able to see that shortly. Oh, that should pop up in a second here. I'll give it another minute, and then we'll get ourselves started here. Just different platforms. It's funny. This is one of those things where it seems like people have started to pick sides. I mean, almost like political parties, whether you use Zoom, whether you use Teams or Google Meet, whatever else. Everyone seems to have picked a platform that they prefer.
I prefer Google Meet. My company's teams. Not a huge fan.
Yeah, that's that's right. I find a lot of polarization around that stuff. All right, well, let's go ahead and get ourselves started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get us all started. Let us get us rolling here. I want this to be an interactive session, so there's a wealth of experience that I think you will see throughout the course of this deck itself, and also what Catherine will be able to share with us as we get a little further along here and what she's seen. So let me share my screen. Let's get started. So hello, everyone, and welcome to what I call Decision Risk Identified, where we quantify the strategy to execution alignment gap. It's what we call decision risk. I'm your host today, and my name is Vinay Raman. Over the past 25 years, I've worked in artificial intelligence, data science, business intelligence. I tell people I worked in artificial intelligence back before it was sexy. And nobody wanted to invite me to parties because they were like, that's just a propeller head. Now it seems much more in vogue. I've worked for Fortune 100 companies, worked in high stakes military, Department of War operations, been the founder of multiple companies, 2 successful exits, and I've experienced along those cuts, bruises, and scars that growth and scale isn't about intelligence. It's actually more about perspective. Yeah, that's kind of compressing a lot into a small sentence there. But today I have with me a special guest, Catherine Halpin. Hi, Catherine. How are you today?
I'm great, and I'm so honored to be here. Thank you.
I'm excited to have you here and share some of the experiences. Let me introduce Catherine a little bit, because you'll be hearing a little bit from her over the time as she does some reflections and kind of gives some perspective on things. She is the CEO of the Halpin Companies. And to give you a bit of what I learned about her from how she describes what she does and who she does it for, she starts out with this concept of most CEOs and leaders search for lost margin in the P&L, but she helps them find millions in the conference room. As a former CPA, she's moved to coaching and advising those senior leaders for over 20 decades. 2 decades. doing not so good at the math there. Over 2 decades, focuses on methodology and on one outcome. And this is what I really honed in on and why I wanted to have her on today. Eliminating the leadership tax. That founder dependency, C-suite misalignment, reactionary operations, that's actively suppressing your valuation, your growth, and your scale. I highly encourage you to connect with her. Be more than happy to make an introduction directly to her if you want to send me a message, if that you feel more comfortable that way. Catherine, is that a good way to frame up what you've been doing for some time?
I couldn't have done it better myself, and I thank you so much.
Well, good. I again, compressing a lot into just a sentence or two. Hopefully over the course of the next few moments here, we're going to start to show people what that experience and what you've seen has done. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a little bit of a journey. I'm going to show you what an instrument panel looks like for decision risk. And this is what I call, this is what creates that gap between strategy and execution. I think that's the most fundamental gap that limits all scale. And I'm hoping, Catherine, that you're going to share some experience of what you've seen over time in conference rooms in organizations that you've seen. In the meanwhile, I'd like everybody to kind of go to the comments and tell me where you're connecting in from. Alex, you and I were just chatting as you jumped in from Maryland. I'd love to hear from the others. Where are you connecting in from, and what brought you to the show? I'd love to hear. Great. I'm going to start with a little bit of question here. And Dan, thank you for chiming in from Toronto, Canada. Nice to have you, Dan. I want to start with what I'll call a little bit of a pithy question, just to kind of get the sort of the wheels turning and kind of set the context. Have you ever left a meeting aligned? Your whole team, you've put it up, you've all agreed to it, and then 3 weeks later realized everyone executed something different. Catherine, I want to stop here. Have you ever seen this happen before?
Well, actually, I haven't seen it today, but I've seen it pretty much every day in my entire career. The first time I saw it where I could really quantify it was a founder that had brought me in. Actually, his CFO brought me in. Was a female, and we were in a civic club together in Phoenix at that time. And he had founded a professional services firm 25 years before, and she had been with him most of that 25 years. And they had gone down a path to sell the company to their senior employees, but nothing was changing about the roles and responsibilities. So they brought me in as a facilitator of that succession planning process. And the 4 partners and I would meet 2 or 3 hours at a time once a month, and we would come up with a plan, and we would think everybody was aligned. And then 3 weeks later, we would realize that the founder had gone completely off target, off message, off plan. And so we had to analyze his role, and we had to start sending the CFO in training in to negotiate expectations with him and keep him in a defined box, because he was just too comfortable with the current CFO. And she would say something and it would just go in one ear and out the other. Oh yeah, right, whatever. But when he was with this younger guy, he was about 30, but had been working with her almost a decade to be trained to be the CFO. He took that meeting much more seriously, and so we were able to keep him in alignment. But it happens every day in every organization, and it's like you said, it takes 3 weeks to realize it. And
Yeah.
Sadly, if you don't have professional advisors on board, it's hard to articulate and fix it.
Yeah, agreed. And I'd like to kind of ask everyone in the audience. I mean, thank you, Dan, for sharing. Alex Chinkol, I'm sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing that properly, from Toronto, as well as Clayton. Thanks for joining in and joining the call. I'd love to just consider, and I'd love to hear in the comments. I mean, does this resonate for you as well? I suspect so. I think this is a universal sort of truth, because that gap has a real cost. That's what we label as decision risk. It's not random. It's a natural phenomenon. In quantum physics, they call that entropy. That's just the idea that the system kind of just naturally moves to its natural state. As a company scales, as an organization, any team starts to move and scale and move forward in direction, things are going to just start to drift. So what we're going to walk you through a little bit here today is, what does that look like, and what can you do about it? And hopefully Catherine will share some stories to continue to go along with that. So thank you, Catherine. So what I've done is we've having something we call the double helix operating model. It's a lot of language there. I'm going to simplify it. We call it DOME. It's a 3-minute diagnostic. It's run quarterly, and it shows alignment of members within a team on a scale of 1 to 100. Why is that important? Because we're showing you here a very simplified version of how decisions break in an organization. You can see that CEO and that board, highly aligned. They've got a score of a 92 out of 100. Sales, 78, respectable score. Product, 65. Operations, 83. The fracture point for this organization right here, you can see this visually, is product. Product is just not playing from the same sheet of music. I want to stop here for a moment. Catherine, you just gave us an example. When you see something like this, how does this kind of reflect? And I'd love to hear from the audience as well, if you care to share in the comments. Catherine, what does this make you think of? Is there a past experience that you can reflect on where you've seen something like this, where just one part of the organization was secretly not towing in the same exact direction, and that might have been completely unintentionally?
Yeah, well, it may be unintentional, but we always say the tone is set at the top. So I would look at the executive that's over the product, offline, that whole piece of the business. The executive that's not in alignment with his or her peers at the C-level.
Yep.
And so that's why he and his entire organization have gotten off track, in my humble opinion. I'd love to hear from Clayton and Dan and Kinkall and
I would love to hear your reflections as well. One of the things we've tried to attempt at doing is saying that these are systemic issues as opposed to personnel issues. And the reason I say that is because oftentimes what may be happening in that boardroom or in that senior leadership team, that what is communicated there, the integrity of that message moving down has mutated. And again, it could be intentional, it could be unintentional. But the point is being able to witness it, identify it, and then say, now that I've measured it, as we've done on screen here, that gives you the opportunity to say, there's a course corrector, there's a slight adjustment that can be put into place.
Yes.
Catherine, sorry, go ahead.
Well, and so thank you for saying that it is a systemic issue. The system has given this executive permission. And if I was working with that CEO, I would say to him or her, who is it that you're being that has given the product leader permission? How have you trained them to believe that they can go offline and diverge and tear down the alignment that you've worked so hard to build? So it is possible, of course, to fix that, but his or her direct supervisor has to take personal responsibility that they've given him or her permission, the product leader permission, or they've trained them to think that this is acceptable, because it's not acceptable. And no organization can operate like this. It's just chaos.
Yeah, that's right. There's the bucket's leaky. Couple quick points I want to make here before we kind of keep moving on here, right? So what we've done here is we've turned this invisible decision or execution risk into something that you can now see and measure. Right, I think that's useful because these fractures, to your point, Catherine, these fractures don't stay local. They start to propagate. They show up in performance because product is not. They're off by fantastic statistics somebody gave me once. If somebody leaves on a plane, a 747 or a 757, going from LA to New York, and they're off by 3 degrees, just 3 degrees, they'll actually land in Washington, D.C. 3 degrees. It's just a slight divergence, but you're in a completely different city. And I think that's what we're saying here, right? Is just a slight difference in how they're interpreting what's happening here. That decision risk, 3 degrees, makes a massive impact on how that organization actually executes. Again, Dan, Alex, I would love for any of you all to share if you all have experienced this as well. Please do so in the comments. Here's why I wanted to set that up, because these are what those alignment fractures we've noticed over about 5,800 leaders who have gone through our process. And Catherine or others, you might have different names. I would love to hear what those names are that you've come up with. For the sake of this conversation, these are what I'm showing how that decision risk shows up. Decision latency. Things slow down. People want to work faster, but then things slow down in terms of how fast they make a decision. Judgment atrophy. People stop using the muscle because they're not quite sure, so they wait for it just to get escalated. Or compliance theater. Let's just do what we're told to do as opposed to actually making a decision. It's easier just kind of be a yes man or woman. Interpretation drift. It's those 3 degrees that happens potentially and completely unintentionally, because it just kind of, that's the way they learned how to do things in the past, and they couldn't see it a different way. Managerial debt. People are, there's Homeland Security and the Transportation Security Administration is constantly putting in airports, if you see something, say something. Well, what if people are saying, I don't want to say anything because I might get in trouble, or I don't know if I'm seeing the right thing. So they just, the managers don't actually actively manage anymore. They just wait for it to escalate. And I'll say the last one is EBITDA erosion, where now there's rework, longer decision cycles. Things don't pop up or don't bubble up soon enough, or decisions aren't made soon enough. I want to stop for a moment here. Are there terms that people are using in their organization? Are they witnessing them? Catherine, how about you? What have you witnessed these? What do you call it?
Well, my favorite, besides the C-suite misalignment that I use every day, I don't use this phrase every day, but in thinking about that product leader who's, their scores were so much lower, they're outliers. He or she may be what I call a crazy maker. And a crazy maker, when you go to them and you say, Bob, let's pretend that his name is Bob, and it's a he. You say, Bob, I'm confused. I thought you were going to deliver that deliverable, product, whatever, refinement, on Tuesday at 2:00. And then Bob will say, oh, I thought you meant next Tuesday. I didn't know you meant this Tuesday. So they're always making you crazy because you can't nail them down, because they won't be nailed down. So that's the only one, but I love all of these. I'm gonna start using all of these today. Yeah, I love the interpretation drift. That's the example I gave earlier with the CEO. He interpreted differently, or he as he slept on it. He was a highly intuitive individual, so he should have been able to coach himself, but for whatever reason, his interpretation would evolve, and then he would drift further and further away from the agreed upon plan.
Yeah, and look, that interpretation drift or any of these could happen for various reasons. Again, unintentionally, right? This is about systemic issues, not necessarily the individual. In the numbers that I gave you, those are the actual alignment scores, the decision risk kind of cohesion of those teams. So the product team was the least cohesive of all those teams. So there's that systemically is going to create a problem there. And that interpretation drift could be, I think we've all experienced or worked with people who don't like conflict, right? And there was a potentially tenuous situation or uncomfortable situation with a customer because they don't understand it and they don't like conflict. They just didn't make the call or didn't ask the hard question or ask the deep-seated question because they just naturally shift away from it. They didn't know to. They don't want to. They just naturally shift away. And that creates a problem, right? So it may not necessarily be something that's intentionally happens. There's lots of different opportunities or scenarios there. Dan says, sounds like organizations need a decision architect to solve this problem. Agreed. And being able to put a system in place, that's hopefully what we'll show you a little bit more here, is that there's a system that can actually do that for you. But I think it requires the hand of an individual focused on that. I think having a leader that can walk them through that process and have the tool set to do it is a fantastic call, Dan. So hopefully this text is not too small here. I've been working with this new presentation software, and sometimes I don't like the way it does things. But what I'm trying to show you is what we did for this company we've renamed them. They were $17.8 million food services technology company in the Midwest. We kind of walked them through this process of plan, execute, run, and results. And that directly maps to this 4-step process of moving from alignment, which I think a lot of people think of alignment, but alignment is just a goal, going to Disney World or improving revenue by 20%. It doesn't talk about the behaviors. So alignment is those shared goals and that clear priorities. Once we have that, and we can get everybody to see the same target and start marching towards it, we start to build execution integrity, which leads to an operating rhythm where they're starting to operate together. And then we start building that cash flow certainty and that EBITDA. It becomes a mechanical process of tying those things together. And what I'd like you to consider is that lots of times alignment is only that first step in getting there. And the key point I want to bring out here is because cash flow no longer is just a financial outcome, it's a downstream expression of that alignment and what that decision risk is. Catherine, what do you think as you hear all of this? What kind of goes through your mind experientially, and what are you processing as you see this?
First of all, your slides are impeccable. I love this slide. You've got so much on it, but it's not overwhelming at all. But I would like to go back to the alignment, since I consider myself an alignment expert. Mm-hmm. I believe that my definition of a high-performing team is that they all have a shared vision. So in addition to shared goals and clear priorities, I would add in vision, shared vision, because when you have a shared vision, it just propels you to bring your best self, and it propels you to just leave behind all the pettiness, all the competitiveness, all the snarky comments. You're just going to bring your best self when you have that shared vision that everybody shares. So again, my definition of a high performing team is, one, they have a shared vision, and two, they have each other's backs. They're going to be able to finish each other's sentences. They're going to stand up for each other when they're not in the room. So I would just modify that slightly. And this is exactly, articulated beautifully, that execution integrity. It is a matter of integrity. Are we going to deliver on time and on budget? And are we going to be accountable? I have a very people first, soft accountability. I grew up in Mississippi, so I'm very soft, very gracious, very kind, but my accountability system, I call it the step up or step out program. It works 100% of the time. And then I love the operating rhythm, because I call it, the meeting rhythm, or the meeting cadence, but it really is an operating rhythm. You're more articulate than me. I love that. And of course, the cash flow certainty. Do you have predictable financial outcomes? If you don't, then what you have is a hobby.
Yeah, that's right. I'd love to hear from anybody else. Dan, you've chimed in. I'd love to hear from others. Jinkle, Clayton, Alex, if you all have any thoughts on this, or some of these words make sense to you, what you're seeing and what you're witnessing. How does this flow resonate or sit with you? I know in the private equity world right now, there's a huge and massive liquidity crisis because people have been trying to figure out how to get to operational alpha. That's the term that's being thrown around a lot these days. Operational alpha being that the gold standard, or maybe even the platinum standard for how operations runs. This was built from doing that in and around private equity companies and other types of companies, where we wanted to try to show how we can take that strategy and tie it directly to execution, that we have a high integrity loop, the feedback loop, to make sure that the strategy keeps getting converted into execution. Execution keeps informing the strategy. Because if that happens, that I believe that cycle becomes operational alpha. That's the term that's being used in private equity these days. And I think it's very applicable to privately held companies as well as other organizations. So the question I want to ask here for everyone, right? Is it possible to see and prevent this decision risk in your organization before it's too late? Because as that product team goes out to do, because they're out of, there's much more decision risk and more decision variance sitting in that team. Can you see that beforehand, before you wait till the end of the quarter to show up in the numbers that, oh, we had to rework things, or the product didn't get launched on time, or didn't actually have the features that we want, whatever, however that manifests itself? Because oftentimes the only way we see it is after execution has already missed the target. Catherine, any stories here about people? And I'd love to hear from others chiming in as well, or who've joined us.
I had a former client, she's retired now. She was the CIO of about a $6 billion company. She had spent her first 25 years of her career at IBM. So she was just such a, phenomenal executive because of all that training and support she'd gotten. But when she would talk to her people about my stuff, she would say, let's address issues when there's just a little tiny burning ember. Let's not wait till there's a bonfire that we have to put out. Let's find and my belief is that these red flags are already there, and NASA has proven this, and the BP oil spill also. Both NASA, every time there's a crash, they do a post-mortem, and they look at every step of the process, and in 100% of their crashes, they've determined there was always a low-level engineer or technical person of some kind who knew that there was a risk of a crash. And either we don't know, they don't let me into their inner circle at NASA, so I don't know for certain whether it was that the person couldn't be heard. He or she tried to speak up, and the executives shut him down, or if he just didn't have the courage to raise his hand and stand up and say, I got a concern here. But that's what I help organizations create, is an environment where everybody feels safe to say, wait a minute, I got an idea, or more importantly, I've got a concern. And the same thing with the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. When they did their postmortem, they were able to identify a name of a person who had been saying, yes, this is at risk, this is a risk. So I believe we can prevent these. We don't have to wait till execution, but we have to create a work environment where people feel safe to step up and speak up.
Yeah, Dan chimes in. He says, pre-mortems, inverting the problem, solve this risk. I like that, Dan.
Yeah.
It reminds me also, Captain, based on what you are telling me and kind of what Dan is saying here. I listened to on NPR one day the commander of the Artemis mission that just went into space probably about 2 years ago. They do a sit down with all of the engineers, all of the astronauts every day, and the commander of the mission will always end every meeting with, so what's going to kill us next? And it gives time for every single person around the table to sit and articulate what it is. And the reporter from NPR said, so why do you do that? Gosh, it sounds so morbid. He said, look, if we forget a toothbrush, it's not like I can just go to CVS down the street and pick up a toothbrush. I'm in space, right? I'm a few hundred miles away from the nearest CVS, straight up. But at the same token, a small little fragment of meteorite, if it hits something or hits a critical part of my spaceship, we're all dead. I need to know that stuff. And I think that's kind of what I'm hearing between what you're saying, Dan and Catherine as well. So
the pre-mortem, I love that, Dan. Thank you.
So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to show you how systemically we can start to see that. And I'd love some reflections. Clayton, Jinkle, Alex, I'd love for you all to help me read some of this. I'd love to see what you all are processing. So I'm going to get to that in just a moment here. I want to give you a little bit of sense of what I'm going to show you here, where it all comes from. That diagnostic that we've used to build those scores that you saw a little earlier on. It decodes the human interpretation of the business. It takes 3 minutes. And this is the beginning point of how you capture the leaders and teams, how they're interpreting the strategy. It creates individual and team alignment, decision risk profiles, and it reveals their interpretations, their fracture points, and their decision risk. And everything that you're going to see in the next 2 or 3 slides here comes from this. It's how you prevent that decision risk and actually start to do, Dan, to what you're saying, pre-mortems. I want to stop for a moment here. Alex chimed in. Thank you, Alex. He says, forest for the trees is a common theme I see when it comes to CRMs, usually complete alignment down the entire line on concept and theory, but a massive disconnect in it in deployment and execution of how the data information is cataloged and presented to the user in sales. Interesting timing for this conversation as Lincoln received a 70% partner 3 years ago through private equity. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. What we're talking about here, Alex, as I think you're very quickly identifying, is this is not an industry problem. It's not a department problem. It's not a geography problem. It's a human problem. In quantum physics, Kepler solved what they call the two-body problem, how the two individuals or two bodies interact. But what it becomes more complicated is when you start to add a third or fourth or fifth. It becomes so nuanced, and the system starts to build complexity within the system as it grows. With 3 or 4 people, there's complexity. Once you start adding 300, 400, 500 people, holy moly, incredibly complex. So there's got to be a systemic way to start to watch and manage that. And I'm going to show you a little bit of that in a second here. And yes, it's a very human problem. I agree with that for sure. Let me kind of show you this real quick. I'm pausing for a moment here. I want you to be able to digest this. You're going to start forming some opinions and some ideas here. And Catherine, I want you to kind of start to verbalize that in your own mind. I want to come to you in a moment. I'm going to ask you a couple of guiding questions here. What story do you see here? Because this is one leader's view of reality, and this is captured from that core diagnostic. Where is this leader pushing for results or hesitating? And what decisions would they make under pressure? Because that's really what matters in the situation in the company. I'd love to hear in the comments. What do you think? There's not a right or wrong here. What is the story that you're starting to see? Because as leaders, that story starts to inform us a lot. And let's not make a judgment as to whether they're right or wrong, so much as this is what they see of the system. And let me give you just a little bit of context here. You can look at market growth that looks like it's around 12 o'clock on the clock face. They've put a 10 out of 10. So this particular leader sees a tremendous amount of confidence, has a lot of confidence around market growth. But you see on either side of it, process efficiency and financial health. Much less confidence there around process efficiency. It's maybe some of what you were saying just now, Alex. Financial health, a little less confidence there as well. Catherine, and I'd love, again, for everybody who's listening in, what do you see here?
Well, thanks for clarifying that I was reading it correctly, because I wanted to make sure. But so with a 10 out of 10 on market growth, but look, he's like a 2 on team communication. He's a negative on product innovation, and he's like an 8 or 9 on customer loyalty. But look, he's like a 2 or 3 on customer experience. So we're not going to get the loyalty if we don't give him the experience. He's just he's focused. He or she is focused on. They don't have a broad perspective about what's going to give you customer loyalty and brand strength. He's got a selective attention just on certain things, and it's not going to be sustainable, because you can't just have a hodgepodge. You have to have a thoughtful.
Yeah. So, Catherine, here's what I love about this, right? Gosh, what a rich narrative is already starting to arrive as you look at this, right? This is not sustainable. What a fantastic statement, right? There's a very limited point of view that this person has, is what I think I heard. Clayton, thanks for chiming in, says, yes, it is a human problem, agreed. And I think this is a human perception that we're starting to see here. Sean says the revenue growth should increase. Agreed. Catherine, back to your point, and I'd love to hear from others if what you're reading, because Catherine's got one read on it, I've got one read on it. I'd love to see the narrative that you're starting to see out of this. But can you see how this person is going to start to make decisions in a particular way based on the set of lenses? If you think about this is the set of prescription lenses that they're putting on every day when they arrive at work, whether it's at home or in the office, a co-working space, whatever the case may be. But this is the set of lenses and the prescription that they're wearing when they arrive and process things. When they look at that strategy and try to translate it into execution, this is how they're translating it. I want you to sit with that for a moment here. Dan, safety and security are the common threads amongst all people. Therefore, leadership teams are trying to maintain their status to keep themselves safe. They aren't playing for the team to win. Yeah, it's a very interesting dimension that we're putting in here, right? We're starting to see a little bit of the bias, which, look, humans are humans. We all have bias. Here's what I want to do next, because this is just one leader's view of the system. Chinkal chimes in and says short-term view versus long-term stability mindset. We see this often with founders with product revenue mindset versus building a sustainable roadmap in company. Yeah, very, very insightful. I want to make sure I'm pronounce this properly. Olufunmi, process efficiency, quality assurance, employee satisfaction are 0. Am I reading this wrong? If yes, this can't work. You said process efficiency, which I see is at a 2. Quality assurance is at a 1, and employee satisfaction here, where's employee down at the bottom, is at a 2 as well. Yeah, wow, it's really interesting as you start to see this and kind of what that narrative that plays to their head as they're starting to make decisions here. Yeah, very, very, very insightful, right? Starts to cause some real concern as to how this person, doesn't mean they're right or wrong. That's how they perceive things. Just keep that in mind. So let's try not to, let's hold on the judgment, which is a very easy thing to do. Let's just kind of become inquisitive because I want to show you what happens next as part of this process. When we get to those scores that you saw a little earlier on, those were a simulation we brought together for a real company. And those scores were what is in the gray here. What does the team see all together? What you're seeing here is the team in gray, that same leader in blue. This comes from our core team executive summary. So we've taken all the members of that team, we've overlaid them on top of each other and figured out here's what the whole team believes as consensus, as a collective. And each member of that team sees differently. And you can see one member here. Just look at this. There's probably no obvious conflict here. It may not show up in that conference room, but that notice how that shape differs. Consider the gaps, so where all the friction is. This is where the decision risk is greatest. And Catherine, I'd love to hear, with all the teams that you worked with, what is being able to see this? And again, audience as well, I'd love to hear what you're kind of processing as you see this. Catherine, what goes through your mind kind of seeing this kind of map?
Well, the value in it, because so often leaders want quantifiable data to prove or disprove what I'm observing and sharing with them. So it's easy to dismiss things that are just my opinion. But when you have facts and data like these heat maps, I think this is phenomenal. And what I think is going on here is that the team has a more balanced perspective than their leader does, and not significantly more balanced, but slightly more balanced. They're more reality based than their leader is. I'm just guessing at that, but I think based on the maps, these are phenomenal tools.
Yeah, wow. So what I love here, right, is that we can start to see that in a couple moments. Remember, this process takes 3 minutes to get here as the first step in starting this process. But can we see how rich this is? Olufemi, I'm kind of taking the liberty in pronouncing, hopefully I'm saying that properly. But she emphasized it can't work. Catherine, to your point, that, gosh, look at this, that balanced perspective. Now we know what that problem looks like. I mean, look at this quality assurance number over here, right? Look at what that individual leader sees and look at what the rest of the team sees. Olufemi, let's walk through process efficiency. Where's process efficiency? Up here, right? Up and towards around 11 o'clock on the clock face. What the leader sees and what the team sees is different. There's going to be conflict. I'll tell you, generally speaking, when there's about 2.5 points of conflict or differential, I don't want to say conflict, but variance, decisions are significantly different in how they're seeing things and how you're creating lots of decision risk there. That is the opportunity to fix. This platform visualizes what it is. Now we know where we need to start spending some time, because that's where that's where all the leakage occurs.
Mm-hmm.
How's everyone seeing this? What I wrote here on the slides here, agreement exists in these areas as to what that aligned goal is, what we've written as the goal for the quarter. Agreement exists, alignment really does not, and there's lots of decision risks that's sitting here. What's everyone seeing? Catherine, how about yourself? As you process more through this?
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking in terms of the decision risk. So I'm glad that you asked me again. So the decisions the risk is huge. The decisions are going to be all over the place. And then even when decisions are made, will we have the legacy? Will the alignment remain? Unlikely. Olufemi said tough to get to the same destination with 2 different maps, probably, or 2 different roads. So yes, we're not going to build alignment, and if we do build alignment, it's going to be temporary, just event-based, not sustainable over a whole process.
I wrote in I appreciate that, 2 different maps, tough to get to the same destination with 2 different maps. This is reality. I will tell you, when we've been doing this for the better part of about 4.5 to 5 years now, again, about over 5,800 leaders who've done this, and we've done their teams. This is not uncommon. This is probably about 90% of the teams that we do. This is sort of the divergent. And again, this is just one leader. Each one of those leaders have a different representation or fingerprint, or decision risk fingerprint. But this becomes the problem. Those deltas are the problem to see. Question I'd like to ask someone to kind of just maybe even make this more practical. Which dent in the gray looks most dangerous to you? Because it exists. It is there today. I want to take you to impact, right? Because look, at the end of the day, we're not in business. We're there to create value. I mean, that's a private equity term, but I think that applies to all industries, all verticals, all types of companies at different stages. But when that interpretation diverges, decision risk increases. And I'll let you read through the slides here and kind of these points here. But the growth versus financial reality. Leader sees acceleration, team sees train. What is the result? Forecast volatility rises quietly. Loyalty versus experience signal. Quality and process conflict. Alignment illusions. Can you see how there's a downstream effect that is going to stop cash flow from predictably, having a hard time with that word, predictably flowing in the door? Rework. Missed conversations that are had in hallways 15 times as opposed to once. Because, wait, that's not what you said. Because of that 3-degree difference landed in Washington, D.C. versus New York City. You all, what's going through your mind as you all see this? Are these impacts feeling like something that's relatable to you? Alex, you put in stuff about CRM system. I'd be kind of curious what's going through your mind. Just on cue, Alex there. Team comms and strategy being inverse or catastrophic. Literally just a matter of time. They're a team of horses pulling in 5 different directions as opposed to pulling that cart in the same direction. Is the cart going forward very fast? Not really. All right, I'm going to show you in numbers what that impact is. Hidden impact. For mid-market firms, this is a $17.8 million company. And I know, Catherine, you're not familiar with necessarily these numbers in this company. I'm introducing it to you, but just kind of give you an order of magnitude. This is based on what Verisent says, what Deloitte says, what Harvard Business Review says. Their market stats, 3 to 5% margin variance in 12 to 18 months, 10 to 15% forecast volatility, 20% coordination load, more rework, more rediscussion of the same topic, redeciding on the same thing. I'll let you all digest that. Punchlines here, literally. Numbers do not break first. Invisible factors punch first. Dan and Catherine, I want to come to you and see how this is kind of processing for you. Dan says, getting the right answers to the wrong questions is the deeper risk. And when compounded, closing the doors becomes real. Yeah, I'm a car buff. If you're out on the racetrack and you just smell something and you look over to your right, to your left, depending on what part of the world you're on, you look at the handbrake and you see that it's been on the whole time. You smell something, you couldn't know where it was coming from, but the car's just not accelerating the way you want it on the racetrack. And I look over and, I left the handbrake on. That's scrubbing off 3%, 4%, 5% of my speed, my acceleration. It was on this all this time. What is the handbrake that's holding you back? That's what we just saw. Because the numbers don't break first. The invisible factors punch first. Catherine, what are you kind of processing as you see this?
Well, this gives me goosebumps because it's so accurate. And I'm concerned, of course, about the margin variance. Of course, any leader would be. And of course, the forecast volatility. They're going to lose credibility quickly. But the thing that really hits home is the coordination load of 20%. So my dad was a workaholic. When I was a CPA, I was a workaholic. And I could see, I didn't have a lot of professional maturity, but I could see enough to see that I could not see the forest for the trees. And that was what Dan, I think, commented on when we started this discussion. Leaders have to be able to take the time away from work, away from the discussions, to step back and look at their challenges and their situations from the broadest possible perspective. All voices need to be heard because some low-level engineer is going to know when NASA's going to have a crash. So the people that you treat as insignificant in your organization, we need to have a way for them to be heard, so that those leadership hours don't increase because of the rework and because of all the invisible factors that are going to punch first are going to be costly, and they're going to require hours to process and dissect and do the rework. So I think that's the most hard hitting, the 20% coordination load. And I love this from all these other sources.
Yeah, let me kind of present it to you visually in terms of what this really looks like. I'll use this term, ghost in the machine. You're paying a tax. Catherine, you call it the leadership tax, and I think that's a very appropriate term here, right? So white is what is actually they're actually realizing, and everything that's colored in is what is being paid to that ghost in the machine. It's just going out the door. It's just sitting there, and that ghost is getting fat, dumb, and rich, and you've never seen it. It's just constantly. I mean, I'm thinking of Ghostbusters and the scene where there's a ghost that just engorging itself, and just everything is falling directly through the ghost. It's actually not going anywhere. It's just wasted food and energy, right? I put some numbers here. Right, what is the specific impact? And I think that I'll be more than happy to send this deck if someone would like to see it. Then some of the language, I mean, the text is a little small here, but I wanted you to see the scope of the impact, right? 534K for margin variance, 1.7 million for forecast gap, 2.1 million for continuation rework costs. Those are aspirational numbers from Harvard and Deloitte and so on and so forth. But gosh, even if we realize 10% of that, we're just talking well north of $1.5 million for a 1.7 for a $17 million company. If we realize 10% of that, is that juice worth the squeeze? Catherine, my question to you and for everyone else there, in terms, you're not familiar with these numbers. I'm just kind of give you sort of rough orders of magnitude here. But talk to me in terms of, have you seen this level of opportunity, or does this feel directionally right in terms of what's opportunity that's kind of the handbrake has been left on, for a better way to put it? How does that sit with you, Catherine? Did I lose Catherine?
Yes, you're back. You're back.
Wow, it's a beautiful time to lose a connection.
It's probably my fault. My karma with technology remains fascinating.
Seems like Vinay is frozen.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's just continue our discussion. I think we're being recorded. Anybody want to comment in the chat or out loud? Tickle's an ex-Deloitte consultant that supports PE firms. Say more, Chinkle. Or just unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in and say, yeah, the opportunity gap is definitely real, and I've seen it across many sectors, right? First, the problem is people don't measure it, right? And then when you start measuring it, there's obviously challenges with the accuracy of the measurement because people are just starting out, right? And the more you dig in, the more dollars you find, and wasted resources. So.
Yes, beautifully stated. Beautifully stated. Any other comments?
Well, I'll bring something to the table that maybe most people aren't thinking about, which is from a intelligence, a meta level perspective, people are communicating with the executive center, which is our prefrontal cortex. It's like having a 6-year-old answer your questions. Right? And meanwhile, you have a hard drive like that can, manage 20,000 bits per second. So,
Right.
I think that's where the problem lies. And so if we can solve that problem, then Carl Jung would be rolling over in his grave and saying, you figured out how to make the unconscious conscious, and good for you. So metacognitive mapping, meta level thinking, I think is the solution. I'm working on it, so I haven't quite figured it out. But if you at least map out your thoughts, then you're at least thinking about what you're thinking, which is a huge step in the right direction.
It's a huge step, right? A huge step.
Vinay, welcome back.
Vinay.
Well, thanks. Not sure how to what happened there. Perfect timing there. Here's what I'd like to do. I got a couple more things, and I just wanted to share with you all. Hopefully, things will stick around long enough for us for me to show you kind of how you do this, because it is a very quick process. Can you all see my screen here?
Yes, we can see your screen again.
All right. Well, we've got only just a couple moments here. So basically, the idea was that we just made the invisible stuff visible again, right? By showing that on a graph in terms of how an individual, that was just in one individual versus the average of the team. And you could saw very early on sort of how each team has got different sets of alignment. We turned that into an understanding where you could see the narrative of each individual. And then how, even though the strategy may have been clear to everybody in terms of language, the invisible factors kind of punch in first. I wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions. So I want to ask you, do you know where your organization is suffering from decision risk? Where are they operating with the wrong interpretation unintentionally? And what if the consequences are 10, 20, 30% of what you can't see, right? Part of what we saw in that graph. Because now you can not only visualize it, but fix it. And it's no longer something that's going to hold you back as invisible, because decision risk breaks the strategy to execution cycle long before the results will ever show up. If you want to see it for yourself and your team, there's the QR code. There is a link. This gives you the ability to fix that decision risk and see that decision risk in under 3 minutes. Why I wanted to show this to you is because what Catherine does is she goes through in understanding this leadership task. We'll visualize what that leadership task looks like. Catherine can take that, translate that into behaviors and movement in the organization. Catherine, thoughts? A little bit of a bumpy ending there, but what do you think?
I just love this so much. I can't tell your colleagues here how much I love it, because I just love it so much. Like your slide before, we're making the invisible visible. And it goes back to all the nuances. Somebody I met at a network event 10 years ago, he said to me, I bet your work is in the nuances. And I said, 100% of my work is in the nuances. What was that look on Bob's face? What was the underneath the snide remark that Betty Sue made in a meeting? It's these nuances, and you're giving life to them and being able to articulate them, and most importantly, quantify them. I think this is a revolutionary tool. Vinya, I really want to be your champion as you get this.
Well, thank you. And it is just a tool. It's something that you do on a quarterly basis. And as all you saw that map early on, it kind of something that you can go to each part of your organization, figure out which part of the organization is the handbrake. Not necessarily because they intend to be, because it starts with telling the truth. I'm chiming into what you said here, Dan, in the comments, which I think I missed out. I didn't have the pleasure of listening into. I would love to open it up to everyone else. I'll stop sharing my screen here. Happy to send this deck out to everyone else. Happy to send you that link so you can try it out for yourself after the call. Give me a second. Let me hit the stop sharing button here. Dan, what are you seeing? I mean, I'd love. I mean, everyone's kind of gone through this conversation. Just reflections on what you've seen. I'd love others to chime in as well.
Well, obviously collecting data is the first point, right? So, a problem is half solved. A problem is half solved if you ask the right questions, right? Like you can. So, the critical thing is seeing the data first, which is what you do, which is fantastic. So then, once you have that data, then you can't deny it. And then the next step is, what do you do to solve it? So, and Vinay, from my perspective, I think it's all upstream. I think it's all about decision making. And unfortunately, people are not making decisions from their greatest aspect of their mind. they're using their executive center, trying to keep themselves safe and secure. So, that's what I see anyway.
Lufundme, Alex, Chinko, Clayton, anybody else have thoughts, kind of what's been going through your mind? I'd love to hear from you if you've got some ideas or perspectives.
I agree with that. I think, I've worked with companies through PE firms and just mid-market companies, and the biggest challenge is just getting the reality on paper through KPI funnels, and just having the mindset that let's just get accuracy visible and measure over a sustainable period of time so we can analyze the trends. That's usually the first battle. So if you can start with that battle early and get that data right, and then you can actually focus on the change management piece of it and kind of closing that gap, right? So it's a struggle I've seen way too often and across all sectors and different sets of companies. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anybody else? Alex?
Dan, with you saying all progress starts telling the truth, I think the biggest hurdle there is people that don't even know what the truth actually is because they haven't taken the time to consider it themselves. But a lot of what we're talking about, and I know it's obviously short-sightedness just from where I'm sitting, but a very tangible example of the theory and concept of what we're describing here is I'm in real estate. I'm a commercial real estate broker. So a lot of this comes about with just daily acquisition, disposition strategies for in a vacuum, a single building for a single investor looking at a single asset. So obviously, zoom out is what we're discussing overall, but the bringing the ghosts to light and seeing them, there was something. It feels like a lifetime ago. A managing broker said to me about deals, which is identifying or digging up the unknown unknowns when it comes to going after a deal. And obviously, you can have your due diligence periods. When it comes to mergers and acquisitions, for looking at companies, it's, you can analyze to death P&Ls. You can go through every single line item for a company. You can go through every single inch of a building, but there are things that you just inherently will never figure out until you're actually in the trenches. So,
I appreciate you sharing that. It's 1:00. We ran right up to our time. Thank you all for joining in, for all the comments. Hopefully this was useful time. I would love to have a chat with everyone afterwards because we are simply the platform. We don't do advising for people. So if there's an opportunity to chat there, I'd love to have a chat with you all. We're just the tool set, just the platform. And it's also a fantastic way to find out where the friction exists in the organization. That's the handbook that you've left on. I want to first thank Hilal. Hilal's the person on my team who puts all this stuff together. So Hilal, thank you so much for doing this, getting this all together and getting everyone to show up. And then Catherine, thank you for your time and shares, and Dan and Alex, Clayton, everyone else. Thank you. Thank you so for participating and making this a good conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Vinay.
Thank you all. We'll chat hopefully to chat soon. Bye-bye.